Welcome to the Nourish Together Gut, Heart, and Mind podcast. I'm Thais Harris, and today I have here Dr. Shay, whom I'm very excited to talk to because he brings something very special to this world of functional medicine. So not only is he a functional medicine expert, speaker, and author, he is also a comedian and knows a lot about the healing properties of humor. And so stay to the end because we'll be talking about that as well as the work that he brings as it relates to brain energy and especially women's health. Welcome, Dr. Shay.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here.
It's wonderful to have you. I want to start right away by talking a little bit about your Neuroharmony Model. I'm very excited about discussing that and letting the audience know how you came up with that and what it is and how it helps people.
Sure. So the Neuroharmony Model came, I've been in the natural health care, I've been supporting people with natural health care for about 25 years now, even before I became even more, I got my doctorate in chiropractic and then went on to do functional neurology and then switched to functional medicine full time, doing virtual care. And even before then, I was involved with um, holistic health practitioner, brain gym and kinesiology and holistic health practitioner degree while I was doing pre-med in college. And the reason I got through all this is I was chronically ill myself, starting as a child, like even at age six. Age six, I was deeply unwell. I had severe crippling insomnia, eating disorder, chronic anxiety, depression, lots of chronic pain. It turns out I had Lyme disease, a lot of really bad physical damaging bullying at school and gaslighting at home, and it led to a sugar addiction, a video game addiction, a coffee habit starting at age six also, and just to survive.
Wow.
And I decided as a teenager I had to take control of my own health because my parents were more interested in medicating me into submission than actually solving what was going on. And I was supposed to be the third generation medical doctor. Instead, I took a pivot into natural medicine. And I, uh, I just, my instinct was just, I need to help people not suffer like I suffered. And I went through this very long, circuitous journey of being led down. You try this magic bullet, this magic bullet, this one, this one, this one. It could be anything from, it's this particular diet. No, it's this particular diet. What do you mean? It's 10 a.m. Now it's this diet. No, wait, it's 1 p.m. Now it's this diet. And it's like, no, you got to snort goji berry juice up your nose. No, it has to be the left nostril, not the right nostril. Like, and it just went on and on and on. And there's all this magic bullet therapies that worked, air quotes, miracles for certain people, particularly those that were selling it to me. And but not for me, no matter how much I tried. And when it didn't work, I was always told, well, you just need more of that thing. And I realized that when I got into practice and started working with severely chronically unwell people, usually females around 35 to 60 with a combination of chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, autoimmunity disease or two, hormone imbalance, weight issues, insomnia, and depression. These were people that were kind of kicked out of both the Western and natural medicine for being too, complicated. Um, I, I wanted to when I really sat back and analyzed all of my lifestyle analysis, I found that people had 10 categories of what their health looked like from the outside in. And that when I analyzed people who were chronically unwell, they had a minimum of 7 out of 10 of these categories or pillars that were crumbling. Didn't matter which 7. It was a minimum of 7. So that's why the magic bulletism didn't work. So the magic goji berry juice up the left nostril was helpful for over here, but it didn't work over here. And just so like if the analogy is if you're sitting on 7 tacks and one of the tacks is removed by goji berry juice, you're technically healthier, but you're still sitting on 6 tacks. So you don't feel better, even though you're technically a little bit healthier.
Mm-hmm.
So so I realized that there had to be a comprehensive lifestyle approach from the outside in. That's one third of the neuroharmony method. That's
Okay.
then there's the so that's one half of the neuroharmony method. It's looking at it from the outside in, lifestyle. Then the other half is looking at someone from the inside out, and that's lab testing.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all these wonderful machines that go bing, that's a Monty Python reference for anyone who's old enough to remember. We have all these wonderful Western, I call functional medicine the best of Western medicine diagnostics with the best of natural medicine, lifestyle, diet, nutrition interventions. That's functional
Perfect.
medicine. It's this
I like that.
estuary. It's the
Yeah.
meeting of fresh and salt water. And we've got amazing functional tests that are way more advanced and thorough than, like, say people, you get food poisoning or whatever, you go to a normal Western biomedical doctor and they give you the standard 10, maybe 12 stool infection test. But on a functional test, it's like 4 dozen plus digestive markers, plus the beneficial commensal bacteria,
Right. Yeah.
plus inflammatory markers, plus, leaky gut, air quotes, leaky gut markers,
Right. Here's zonulant. Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. It's this massive expanded panel that, and then this also, we can test for mitochondria integrity. I was actually called in to finalize a mitochondria test as an outside consultant to make sure they weren't missing anything. I studied with Dr. Kalish for 4 years, who's kind of the luminary of teaching mitochondria. And his direct teacher was Dr. Richard Lord, who invented half of all the functional medicine tests we use today.
Mm-hmm.
And my or then the hormone tests, whether it's adrenal, thyroid, there's
Right.
not one type of estrogen E2 to test for. There's actually like 7 to
Mm-hmm.
test for on a Dutch test. Then you can go into the trio of metals, mold, and Lyme. The big bads.
Yeah.
And there's the entire field of genetics. And when we combine the outside in of what someone's lifestyle is with the inside out through functional testing, then you have a truly harmonious model to actually bring someone to their you get people from uh suffering to normal and normal to optimal, as opposed to Western medicine philosophy is to getting them from emergency to stable.
Right. Removing just one tack.
Well,
Or
well,
maybe a
well, I'm
couple.
not. Well, the thing is, it's like with Western medicine has philosophically applied to a whole different branch of medicine. Western medicine philosophically came out of triage out of World War I. Philosophically,
Mm-hmm.
it's, are you gonna die or lose a thing? No, go over there and just suffer a bit. We'll maybe give you some painkillers. We got more urgent things to do. That is not a bad paradigm. In fact, that is the correct paradigm in an emergency situation that requires stabilization.
Yeah.
That is the incorrect paradigm to bring someone from chronic to normal, normal to optimal. And the functional medicine paradigm is completely inappropriate in the emergency situation.
Right.
There are actually two different philosophies that are getting confused. Mostly it's the mission creep from Western medicine's emergency care model. They're having a mission creep into everything. And that's where it's getting really problematic, because they're applying an emergency medicine paradigm into something chronic. And there's nothing in the philosophy about getting someone to optimal in an emergency care model, like nothing.
Right.
So so I have deep respect for Western medicine when it is applied to emergency care, because that is a field that I have no skills for, and I'm not trained for, and it's just not, and we need it just like we need the functional medicine side. So when I looked at when I looked at these two pieces, the outside in and the inside out, when you combine them, now you have a harmonious model for health and wellness, from
Mm-hmm.
chronic to normal, normal to optimal. And everything else that we can discuss is just merely details of that: labs and lifestyle. Everything else is just details.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's a very good way to point out how neuroharmony model specifically that you created comes together, right? So when you're working, say, with women, especially as you mentioned, in that age of 35 to 60, um, how much time do you feel like usually, I'm sure everybody's a little different, but when you're taking people through this model, where does it start? Do you start with labs? Is it
Oh,
like
okay.
questionnaires? Is it a big thing? And then how
Yeah.
long? Because I feel like one of the things that I see, I start with 3-month packages, because I feel like it doesn't take, you can't get transformation in like 1 or 2 sessions with somebody.
Extremely
So
rarely, depending on the
yeah.
person.
So how long is your journey usually?
So the journey begins with a very, very extensive questionnaire because each of the 10 pillars has about 20 to 30 questions to figure
Mhm.
out what that's about 200 to 300 questions. And it's every question is non-random. Every question came from a case study. I'll give you an example. One of my clients had every sign of mold poisoning, like every sign of it, but he could not find mold anywhere in his apartment. I asked him to double check. After the second earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand, he decided to take the painting that was hanging over his head where he slept. Spoiler: never, ever, ever hang a painting over your head where you sleep in an earthquake zone. That is super dangerous. Okay. Now, when he pulled the painting off, what was behind the painting but a complete layer of mold on the paper behind the painting that was right over his head when he was breathing all night, every night. So
Wow.
guess what question got added to the list? Have you checked behind your paintings for mold? So when some of these questions may seem a bit odd, but I assure anyone who's doing them is like, oh, that's a case study. That was the key question. So
Got it.
so they fill this out digitally, and then I receive it and I review it in detail ahead of time to come up with a battle plan because everyone has the same pillars, 10 pillars, but nobody has them in the same order of priority. The sleep pillar, bedtime pillar, is for teaching purposes pillar number 10, but it's usually priority 1, 2, or 3 for people.
Hmm.
So when I meet with someone for that first hour, I've come to the consult with a complete plan, prioritized and organized, and it's going over what I found, what it means, and what's recommended, and asking clarifying questions. And what it's not is this horrid experience of I walk into this happened to me multiple times, and I walk into a practitioner's office and they like greet me and then they look at my chart for the first time as they're sitting with me, which is just infuriating. Uh,
Yep.
so I I vowed to never do that with any of my clients. So I review everything in detail ahead of time. So that's the first hour is going over the outside in of what what to do, how to do it, and in the exact order in which to do it. So there's a plan. From the inside out, then there's the best labs are determined for their situation, and
Mhm.
they're also labs are also can be prioritized. Like I would love it if people were able to do gut hormones, mitochondria, genetics, cardiac. Blood
Right.
sugars, anemias, plus mold, metal, Lyme, environmental toxins, for funsies. The the but that's not a reality for a lot of people. So there has to be attention paid to what are the top 1, 2, maybe 3 tests. People can do more, great. If they can't, then we've got prioritization.
Yeah. Beautiful. And talking about the pillars in your model, I am wondering if you could talk a little bit about the role of chronic stress, which I think,
Pillar 8.
especially in women's health,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously for all of us, but I do feel like with the hormonal changes and perimenopause and menopause, and then just all the different, life stressors. And I feel like we're in a particular moment where everything feels really stressy. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of that in all of the
Or
pillars?
so in the pillar model, pillar number 8 is bothers or stressors and unresolved traumas. And
Hmm.
the This is one of the four pillars that can be, most all pillars can crumble over time, but four of the pillars can be sledgehammered. And this is one of them. So the stress sledgehammer can be a legal notice, a death of a loved one, acute sickness or accident of a loved one, really horrible news that affects you meaningfully, whether it's locally or nationally or in the world. The uh, that can be a sledgehammer, which can just knock down the pillar massively. Just for sake of completion, the other pillars that could be sledgehammer is pillar three, which is the physical body, which can be sledgehammered by a sledgehammer,
Mm-hmm.
or a car accident,
Accident
or a sports
diagnosis.
injury, or a major fall, or violence, or something like a head injury. That pillar can be sledgehammered. The other sledgehammer pillar that can be sledgehammered is pillar four, pillar five, which is biotoxins. If you're exposed to an acute toxin, whether it's a heavy metal, a
Mm.
patient who bought a house and the local government failed to fulfill their duty to inform her that it was a former meth house. They were legally obligated to do that, and they didn't. And she started a fire using a fireplace, and that's where they threw all the toxic iodine, and it filled, and she got horrifically sick from all of that. And or exposure to massive, like an agricultural spray that flies over or whatever it might
Mm-hmm.
be. So you can have a sledgehammered biotoxin, and I want to make people paranoid that every toxin is a sledgehammer. That's not true. It dosage matters, your level of resilience matters, and your genetics matter. That all kind
Mm-hmm.
of culminate together into a perfect storm of you get just bowled over by a toxin. And then the fourth pillar that can be sledgehammered is the bugs or hidden infections and mold. An infection can be a sledgehammer, like an amoeba, for example, a bad
Right.
parasite, a really, really bad mold exposure. If you're vulnerable to it, take you out. I just left a moldy apartment 2 months ago, and
And how did you find
it.
it?
I did. I did the Envirobiomics endotoxin, mold, and actinobacter swab test around my apartment, and all three came back super high. So I
Wow.
was being poisoned by my apartment. Um, so going back to your Bob, so those are the four pillars that
So
can
the
be
stress,
sledgehammered.
yes.
Yeah, yeah, physical body, toxins, infections, and stress. So the way that so stress and unresolved trauma is a multimodal approach. There's multiple access into the nervous system to help with resilience and resolution. So resilience is a bit different than resolution. Uh, Having neurological resistance to stress, people can have a very high resilience, but have lots of unresolved trauma. And then people can have very low resilience to stress, but not have a lot of unresolved trauma that's making them more vulnerable to being hyper responsive. So they're two different tracks here when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to stress. And sometimes people have such low resilience that trying to resolve prior trauma is too much because it throws them off kilter. So with those individuals, I would encourage looking at the other four pillars and looking at other testing to increase their physical resilience first,
Mm.
so that they actually have more physical and biochemical and nutritional capacity to handle whatever is lurking in the shadows over here in the unresolved trauma. So if people have very high resilience and they've got a lot of unresolved trauma, then these uh, people have a lot of unresolved trauma and super high resilience. Usually, they're very high achievers because they're just
Yeah.
doing stuff to not look at these shadows over here.
Yeah.
Um, and they seem to be very superpowered, and yet they cannot sit still. Like, because if they do, then
Yeah.
all the bad thoughts start coming up to the surface. And eventually, high performers realize that they hit a ceiling of performance because now the shadows of the unresolved traumas are holding them back. And that's kind of the dark night of the soul in the entrepreneurial world.
Yeah.
Uh, and for them, uh, if they don't want to talk about it, Then I recommend EMDR, which is the eye movement
Desensitization.
desensitization reintegration. I forget.
Yeah,
I was swimming in acronyms in this space. So I
yeah.
lose track. I recommend EMDR because they don't have to talk about the thing in order to shake the etch a sketch of the trauma. EMDR is a great technique if anyone hits a plateau in any stress reduction or trauma resolution technique. So if you're doing like the work of Byron Katie or cognitive behavioral therapy or you know internal family systems or if you're under a very properly trained, highly professional
Hmm.
assisted psychedelic therapy, EMDR is the thing you can use outside of all of those to help you break through the plateaus of any given technique. Um,
And I'm going to have to put a plug in here because my husband is a somatic psychotherapist and he
okay.
practices EMDR and
Right.
has helped people just like, it's really amazing just to say I fully and completely stand behind what you were saying right now
Absolutely.
around EMDR because it can be, it can make all the difference. Absolutely.
And it was proven in the roughest clinical crucible imaginable, which was it was proven by helping returning Vietnam veterans. So you're talking about tight-lipped, highly traumatized soldiers who don't want to talk to civilians. And I can say that because my father was the staff psychiatrist of the Boston VA for over 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And he was the
Okay.
one who said, like, soldiers don't necessarily want to talk to civilians because civilians honestly just don't understand.
Hmm.
And they don't. And so, but EMDR, you don't have to talk about the thing. And so this is where EMDR got vetted. And that actually is a double entendre. I didn't even that was a pun. I didn't even. Okay. Wow. Okay. So yeah, EMDR is kind of the emergency switch. Not the emergency. It's the ace in the back pocket and someone gets stuck.
Hmm.
Um, and the other thing about dealing with stress and trauma, it's the power of a group and a community. And one of the stresses that everyone's dealing with is the fracturing of communities into networks. And we're losing communities and just building networks, and that's not
Hmm.
great. And then families, within the family, everyone's atomizing into their own, digital devices. And then families are atomizing away from other families because everyone's going off in their own direction, and there's not really a communal anchor except maybe a common school or a common activity. People are leaving, religious institutions by droves, but I do think people need community. Now, last thing I'm going to mention has to do with evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology. That the female nervous system was evolved to be more anxious because the female nervous system was evolved to be optimized not for the female's emotional well-being, but for the well-being of the mother-infant dyad.
Hmm.
You're supposed to be more alert and vigilant and anxious if there is a utterly helpless infant that you're supposed to respond to the moment the infant whimpers. You're supposed to be more anxious and hypervigilant.
Hmm.
And typically males were hunters. They're supposed to be more stoic because they're going to go out and kill things with their bare hands.
Hmm.
The right side of the brain has more estrogen receptors in total than the left side of the brain. So if you have more estrogen in your system as a post-puberty female,
Hmm.
your right brain is going to be more activated by dint of there being more spots for it to be lit up by there being more receptors for estrogen compared to the left. And your right insular cortex has way more attachments to your sympathetic nervous system than the left.
Hmm.
So if you're more right brain activated because you have more estrogen in your system and you've got more estrogen receptors there on the right side, you're going to be more activated in the sympathetic nervous system. Now, are there exceptions to this? Of course there are. There's variability. That's actually
Yeah.
how that's actually how human evolution works, is that you got like 80+% of everything is super predictable, and then you got these outer 10% that you're playing with the edges because evolution is there to adapt over time to a changing environment. So when you asked me about what can women do about stress and all the rest of it, number one, it's kind of baked into the software. So
Yeah.
that's not to say that people listening to this, the women listening, should careen into nihilistic fatalism, like, oh my God, I should give up. I should just always be stressed because the
No.
bald guy on the podcast who sounds super smarty pants said that my insular cortex, or whatever that was, says that I'm a stress bunny. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that you can stop. In Buddhism, there's something called the second arrow, where
Yes.
I have anxiety about the anxiety.
Yeah.
Oh, I have anxiety. That's kind of a thing. I'm not going to have anxiety about having anxiety because I have anxiety, and that's just kind of how I'm wired. I'll take it up with Mother Nature if I'll send a memo.
And
But
Dr. Shay, to share, I mean, I have a almost 6 month old baby upstairs. I have a
okay,
10-year-old, and this is my second go round. And it's palpable just how it
okay,
changes the minute you have the infant, as you were mentioning
okay.
earlier.
So you're living this right now.
I'm living it right now because the
Okay,
hypervigilance goes up, and thoughts that, before I even had my first child, it didn't occur because I'm a pretty like up person and positive and definitely like, sort of high performing with many of the things that you mentioned here. But having the first child, all of a sudden, it's like all these worst case scenarios, right, pop into your head, and there's definitely an increase in the anxiety, and it is biological. It's definitely felt not like I'm going crazy, but it's like, oh, this is baked into the system because now there's another being that I need to account for all the time, and that I
totally.
need to be able to prevent from all these possibilities, right, of threat. So anyway, just want to say, because what you were saying, and more like it's not just theory. I mean, it's
Yeah.
lived and it's clear. But go ahead.
So that's basically the grand summary, and then there's multiple tools available to people, whether it's breathing techniques,
Hmm.
meditation. I'm a fan of the work of Byron Katie. There's EMDR, constellation therapy, internal family systems. The primary benefit in a therapeutic relationship with someone's helping you with stress is not actually the technique, it's the relationship. And that's it's techniques obviously have a meaningful part, but you have to like and trust the person you're working with.
Hmm.
And by the way, a working definition for the placebo effect is how much you like and trust your doctor, how
Hmm.
much you like and trust your clinician. I mean, that's where we met, was at a conference where I
Yeah.
was lecturing to a group of about 300 plus of our colleagues, how do you become more likable? And the the placebo effect, in my opinion, should be renamed the rapport effect.
Interesting.
And that's how people can get placebo is not some magical thing. It's actually rapport. And if people feel good about and trust the person they're working with, then their cortisol and stress levels automatically drop. If someone you don't like or trust gives you the perfect prescription to get better, you will have a stress response whenever you think about the person or think about the prescription or do the prescription because it's yoked to that person you don't like or trust. That's the nocebo effect.
There you go.
Yeah.
And that's so important. I'm so glad you brought that up because especially when we're talking about stress,
Mhm.
that is a big thing. And I work with people that are often working with multiple other practitioners. And there's something about like not wanting to go into a particular office, or, people that stress out and their blood pressure goes up when they're going to see somebody that if they were to take their blood pressure at home, it would be very different. But because they're getting stressed about the particular situation, so it's a real thing, and definitely worth investigating and taking account of. So for stress for women, I just want to recap a little bit because you said um, there were so many amazing things that were talked about, especially the need for community. And I think when people are stressed,
Mhm.
it's something we don't talk a lot about in the medical environment, functional
Totally.
medicine or not, but just like this need for community, the need for really healthy relationships. And then you can look into the practices like meditation, EMDR, breath.
Mhm.
There's just, we can't say enough about the importance
Totally.
of reconnecting with one's own breath. Can you speak a little bit about just DNA and how you weave that into the process that you do with clients, and just how
Sure.
looking at SNPs and looking at somebody's genetic tendencies, how can you combine that with the approach that you're using for healing?
Sure. I think genetics is probably the easiest place for people to start and has the highest value dollar for money in any test you can do without even a close second. And I say that because if you run a gut test, a hormone test, a mitochondria test, a mold test, a Lyme test, the value of those results drops precipitously after the 6 month mark of the date of the test.
Mm.
Whereas a genetics test, the results are good for life. So you can
Hmm.
amortize whatever you invest in a genetics test, just amortize that over the number of decades you plan on living, and the cost effectively drops to nothing.
Yeah.
So if people want to start somewhere, I say start with genetics. And I the way that I look at genetics is I tried to solve for a lot of the problems the other genetics companies had created. So number one, when people do a regular genetics test, they get sent, here's your whatever 50 to 300 SNPs, which is single nucleotide polymorphisms for the Scrabble enthusiasts slash gene nerds out there. Uh, the, these are your genes. This is the ones that are, you have the air quotes good version, and then here are the ones that have the air quotes bad or air quotes super duper extra special bad version. And you get these list of like 300 genes, and say you got 150 of them are the bad or the super bad versions. There's now this overwhelm and confusion and fear because they're not organized or prioritized, and you're given like 150 recommendations that all seem equally important. And the reality is genes are not all genes are created equal in regards to health outcomes.
Hmm.
Uh, I'll give you an example. Gary Brecka went on to Rogan in December of 23 and said, all you need are these 5 genes for methylation, and that's all the gene testing you need. And when I heard him say that, I started screaming into my podcast player. I was so upset. And it's like, no, methylation is not the most important process. It's actually downstream of inflammation.
Hmm.
So to me, the inflammatory genes are the highest priority. And specifically, even there's 2 others, like the vitamin D receptor genes, are even higher priority than those. You can put them in the inflammatory genes, but 3 to 5% of your entire human genome is controlled by the vitamin D receptors because they determine how well you use vitamin D. Vitamin D is not for bone density. That's a little bit of what it does, but the majority of what vitamin D does is control inflammation in your immune system.
Hmm.
So I wanted to work with genes in a way that was organized and prioritized. The order of priority is not methylation, number one, and everything else is secondary underneath that. And by the way, I when I get upset, I make a PowerPoint. So I went and did my research.
I love that.
I I did my research and I went on 3 separate podcasts debunking Gary Brecka's claims, showing my research. The 3
I'll have to
podcasts,
check them
those are
out.
on my YouTube channel. You can just go
Okay.
look it up, Dr. Shay methylation, and nerd out to your heart's content. The highest priority for health, in my opinion, are the VDR receptors, the inflammatory genes, the genes that control the key enzymes in the mitochondria to quench free radicals, because 95% of all free radicals are generated in the mitochondria. Then it's liver detox genes, phase 1, phase 2 liver detox. Then it's methylation. So
Yeah.
if you know that genes have a priority, then you can make recommendations because the things above can influence the things below. So you don't have to do 150 things for 150 gene variants. You can do 10 things that then
Hmm.
address the ones underneath them. So now genetics becomes winnable
Yeah.
and practical and sane as opposed to overwhelming. And again, people will not careen into nihilistic fatalism because they see a sea of orange and red dots on their genetic readout and they think they're going to die on Tuesday because they have so many dots. They might as well give up now past the Twinkies. So that was one thing to solve
Yeah.
for with genetics is prioritization and organization. The other is, can you determine your optimal diet? And you can now it's not a SNP test. It's not a good, bad, or super bad gene. It's
Mhm.
actually a different. It requires a separate swab and a separate machine. And I got to send it. I actually got to send it off to a different country
Mm.
to get it run. And you check the number of duplicates of a gene as opposed to the variation of a gene. This particular gene is called the AMY1 gene. It makes salivary amylase. It's the enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates in your
Mhm.
saliva. Best way to think about it is imagine your digestive system's a fort in medieval times, and you've got, you know, cannons lining the fort, and the Visigoths or the Vikings that are charging the gate are carbohydrates.
Mhm.
Now, the more cannons you have, the more you can mow down these carbs. So the AMY1 gene in this case, the variation of the type of cannon, is it a green cannon, a yellow cannon, or a red cannon, which is good version, not good version, really bad version. In this case, the differences between the good and the bad version are really marginal. Actually, there's not really that much difference.
Mm.
It's the number of cannons that matter. Just for sake of numbers, the green cannon shoots 100 cannonballs an hour. The yellow is 95. The red is 90. I'd rather have 10 reds than one green. So it's the number of copies that matter. So if I have fewer copies of this gene to make amylase to break down carbs, I'm a lower carb diet person.
Mhm.
So if I have lots of cannons, I'm a higher carb diet person. So for example, I was eating a perfect, and I mean perfect, Mediterranean diet. I knew all the names of my farmers and their chickens. The quinoa was grown on the South Island of New Zealand, picked by left-handed monks on the last harvest moon and sung lovingly as it was shipped by passenger pigeon across the whatever. It was not a quality of carbohydrate issue, it was a quantity. I was having energy drops and roller coasters, gas problems, and just feeling off, even though everything was organic and local and blah blah blah.
Mhm.
I was having too many carbs for my genetic capacity because when I did my genetics in this way, I had only two, you can have up to 20 copies of this gene.
Mhm.
Uh, I think they found one person with 23, but whatever. It's 120. I had two.
Wow.
That is on the same level of low carb tolerance as the Inuit, Aborigines, Maori, Pacific Islander, Native Americans that did not have agriculture at scale.
Mhm.
Now, my ancestry is from the northern Russian latitude, so that makes sense. Not a lot of grain grow up there.
Right.
So, I have a very, very, I'm a low carb paleo, like very low carb. So within 1 week of switching my diet to my carb tolerance, my digestive issues and energy roller coasters leveled out.
Mm.
So you can now test for, are you keto, paleo, Mediterranean, or high carb? People have one copy. Those are my keto folks. 2 to 4s, they're paleos, 5 to 8s, Mediterranean, 9 aboves, they're higher carb. And there's
Okay.
much more nuance to this, like how much you give some, like people are different sizes and heights, and then there's high carbs and there's low carb carbs. Like there's a Gala apple and then there's a Granny Smith apple. There's very different sugar profiles there. So there's nuances to this that I've figured out to how to really
Got
dial
it.
people's carb levels are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I want to spend just a few minutes because I know this is so full. Obviously we could talk for a
Mhm.
long time. There's much more to dig into with both your model and DNA. But I want to just bring a little bit about the healing power of humor. I
Mhm.
mean, you've already sprinkled some humor throughout. I think anybody listening has been able to get a sense of your funny side, shall I
Mhm.
say. But so can you talk a little bit about being a healer and bringing humor to it?
Sure. Humor, if people want kind of a more full picture, I have a full 1 hour comedy special for free on YouTube called Neurospicy: Love, Life, and Comedy on the Spectrum. So I have Asperger's syndrome, and I made a full 1 hour comedy show explaining what that is and what it's like and what everyone can do to better navigate and adapt to people on the spectrum. But there's no politics, there's no curse words, there's no cheap body fluid jokes. It was designed to bring people together, not dunk on normies or self-immolate as an Aspie. It's really was put together to bring people together within edutainment. And I just keynoted this past weekend, at the time of this recording, at the American Academy of Therapeutic Humor. I performed my full 1 hour show in front of about 200 plus health professionals whose entire 30-year existing organization has been to bring the healing power of laughter therapy into the medical environment. They had Patch Adams speak there in the 90s.
Wow.
So this is the organization dedicated to showing the legitimize the science of humor as part of a healing practice. And AATH, American Academy of Therapeutic Humor. So if you want to look at all the research behind it, they're the ones who are spearheading this, and they're the wonderful organ. So the nicest seminar community I have literally ever been in. Like everyone is there. Like it was the vibe was incredible. Everyone was super fun, super friendly, hilarious. Like it was great. It was wonderful. Now in terms of how I inject humor to me. If people want to be funny, never try to be funny. Aim for truth. Because if people look at really good comedy, they're always talking about the truth. And I mean, we talked about this at the conference we met at. I lectured on the ABCs of humor. A is aim for truth. B, be authentic. And C is commit to kindness. It's not necessary to attack with humor. We don't need that. That's unnecessary. And if you can, sometimes humor can be quite cutting and piercing.
Yeah.
And there's a level of, I mean, if I was D, I would put like diplomacy. Like there's a way to use humor skillfully in a way that lifts people up, even if we have to temporarily articulate a very painful dynamic. If it's with the intention of naming it to resolve it, clear it, address it, temporary discomfort in order for a long-term benefit, as opposed to attacking people. So humor is also a great vector of truth because it can soften the overwhelm or of bad news. So like I use humor because as a clinician, you got to deliver bad results on labs like literally all the time. And so I'll give one brief example. Like I'm reading some mitochondria lab or their genetics lab. I'll give my genetics lab. So when I had up until 2 summers ago, maybe 3 summers ago, I was the gold medalist in the crappy gene Olympics. Gold medalist. I had the worst genes when it came to health. Then I got dethroned. Now I'm silver place and no one knows my name. So no one knows who the silver medalist is. So whenever I give someone, their genetics and it's particularly bad, it's like, look, you're in good company. You can join me on the podium for the crappy gene Olympics. We can swap medals, whatever you want to do. Or if someone has really, 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 really good genes, and I say, look, the good news is your genes are great. The bad news, your health issues are completely self-inflicted. You can't blame your parents on this one. Sorry, you can't blame your parents on this one. This is good. So that's how I can use humor to deliver truth, and then it's not being dismissive. It's never dismissive. It's naming the problem, owning it, and then it just makes life and this health journey together so much more palatable and frankly easier to win, because if you like and trust your practitioner and they make it easy to understand and not so scary, automatically your cortisol levels are going to drop and you're going to get better faster. Automatically. I took stand-up comedy classes in 2019 because I read the article on the placebo effect is how much you like and trust your doctor. And I literally read this article and said to myself, okay, if helping people is my mission, then it is a clinical imperative, a requirement to be more likable. And that that's when I signed up for a stand-up comedy class and an improv class, and I stuck with stand-up because that's more my style.
Hmm.
So that's why now that was 2019, and now I've got a full 1 hour comedy show out. So that's kind of the journey of how to use comedy to help with people's healing journeys. Yeah.
Yeah, love that. And thank you for sharing because I feel like people should definitely watch it, connect with you. So, how can the audience connect with you, Dr. Shay?
It's very easy. They just go to my website, www.drsamshay.com. That's drsamshay.com, drsamshay.com. And as of this recording, people can schedule on there a free 15-minute or so chat with me to see
Hmm.
if this model is, if people are in the right space to step into this model.
Hmm.
And I'd be happy to help. Then there's people want to do just the genetics, and like they're just interested in genetics, and they want to like get their organized, prioritized genetics and all those things. There's an option on my website to just do a DIY, and there
Hmm.
we got all the reports, the custom reports that are put together, a 12-week implementation program, an entire massive resource library of several hundred videos if you want to nerd out on a particular gene or three. That's all there. And then there's a group coaching option if people want. I'm on a group coaching call twice a month for people to engage in dialogue about genetics in real time. So those are the three ways that people can engage.
Great.
And that's
And
my YouTube.
your comedy, your 1 hour show, how can they find it?
That's on my YouTube channel. So it's literally just go into YouTube and just put in Dr. Sam Shay. Please subscribe, and then just put in there's a playlist on comedy, or you can put in just Neuro Spicy, and you'll see an image of me with the title Neuro Spicy: Love, Life, and Comedy on the Spectrum, and it's an hour and 3 minute show because the 3 minutes are for the credits. And there's a very special component to the credits as well that leads directly from the finale of the show, and it makes sense why it's a bit longer than an hour with this.
Okay, that's good to know. So people don't turn it off too soon.
Totally.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate your time today and all that we've discussed. And yeah, I can't wait to hear. I hope people will comment and put in questions. We can stay in dialogue with Dr. Shay. And yeah, thank you again.
Thank you.